We got, according to my time, we got a minute and a half. So I'm gonna run and clean my glasses. Am I on? I'm not shooting, right? You got that up, right? Am I up? Hello, everyone. Thank you guys all for attending. My name's Chris Burns, and we're gonna get this thing started here. The fun and entertaining title of this talk is Gold Mines and Gaping Wounds, and thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've done in my career, the paths you might be able to take as you exit the dojo and embark out into the world. So before we start off, talk a little bit about who I am and what gives me the right to do this right now. I've been in this industry for about 25 years. I've worked mostly with Fortune 500 companies. Done a lot of consulting. I've consulted for Disney. I consulted for companies like Prudential. I was mostly hired and brought in as a firefighter, which means when somebody's got a project that is upside down, it's $1 million or more in the hole and a year or more overdue, I was the guy that they would bring in to fix it. So that's kind of the firefighting aspect of it. One of those jobs was mylife.com, people search engines on the planet. Right now they have a little over 1 billion registered users, which is ridiculous. They sent out approximately 60 million emails a week. And they wanted to be able to get that up to 150 million emails a week. And that project wasn't getting anywhere. So I was brought in to architect their email systems and fix that problem. I got the distinct pleasure of building Hughes Space and Communications satellite failure rating system, which was kind of cool. It was a fun project. Giant mil-spec about the size of a phone book that basically said for every single piece part on a satellite, a resistor, a diode, a transistor, a motherboard, anything, it should operate under these conditions. And we had to codify that so that I could plug in an entire satellite, blow it up into all of those piece parts, and calculate the failure rate per billion hours of operation in space. Another really fun project. And then the last one, and probably my favorite, was writing the data acquisition algorithms for the largest laser on planet Earth, which is up at Lawrence Livermore National Lab in Northern California. This thing shoots 192 laser beams simultaneously that all coalesce within 1/trillionth of a second on a target the size of a grain of salt. And it creates nuclear fusion. And it was really, really cool. As they were building the facility, we got to go climb around inside the magnetic bottle and just play around in these giant laser tubes. Get there, right? So you guys have graduated or you're approaching graduation. What's out there? What does the world look like beyond the dojo? I know most of you guys come from backgrounds that are not technology related, and maybe a lot of you have no idea what even a job looks like out in the world, let alone the interview process, what your prospects are, what pathways can you even follow. So what I want to do is introduce you to a little bit of the landscape. We'll talk about different avenues you can go down to get work. We'll talk about the parameters of those avenues and what kinds of things you should watch out for. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll have a better idea of which way you want to go. So to start off with, there's the notion of the employee, of just working for a company. And this is kind of that default operation that everybody's used to. When you're an employee as a developer or as a technologist, what does that look like? So this is the tried and true methodology. Right? There's a lot of stability. You typically have a set work schedule. It's, you can think of it as kind of a 9-to-5 job. There's going to be crunch times, obviously, where you're going to put in overtime, but You always kind of know what you're getting into. There's a consistent routine. It's relatively low stress, not to say there won't be stressful time. It's kind of the approach to being developed, which is often really people crave that. Security. So what you're going, you know when you're going to get paid. You're only going to be out of work under what I would call extreme circumstances. The company goes out of business, or you mess up really badly, and it's grounds for termination, or you decide to leave on your own. But other than that, you're there. It's kind of a lifetime gig if that's what you want to do. The other good thing about full-time employment is a lot of companies nowadays are offering career path enrichment and growth. So they want to keep you there. They want to keep you learning. So you always have the chance to go back and either pick up a class here or there, take some special thing. Maybe you want to get really good at Angular, so they send you off to some conference or something. When I was at the lab, it was not uncommon for the lab to pay for your degree if you went to Stanford. So if you could get into Stanford, the lab would pay for your degree. Those things are really vary based on time, how long you've been there, and who you're working for. But all of that is definitely an option if you go that route. And then the last thing, and something that you really need to consider, is the benefits. So it's not just about the compensation that you're getting. So when you're going out there and you're saying, I want a $100,000 a year job, you got to consider all of the other aspects of that. You're getting health insurance, maybe vision, dental. A lot of places are offering life insurance now. May not be that critical, but when you have a family, that starts becoming an issue. Paid time off. One of the really cool movements in the industry right now is a lot of companies will offer unlimited paid time off. The idea is you come in and you work and you do what we need you to do. And if you need to take time off, you do that. I'm not going to track it. I don't care. Just I rely on you to get your job done. And if you don't, there's a problem. Otherwise, if you're here, great. And if you're not, I expect you to have your report on my desk in the morning. So that's a really cool thing. You'll also get other types of compensation where you might have an ESOP, which is an employee stock ownership plan, where a company is doing well, and as a benefit to you, they'll give you stock in the company. Or you may get stock options if you're working for a startup. There could be 401ks, profit sharing. There's all sorts of other ways to get paid. So somebody may come to you and say, hey, I know you want 100 grand. I'll give you 70, but all of this other stuff. And that really factors in. So beyond that, if that's not a route that you want to go, you can go down the path of what I would call a freelancer. And this is kind of a business butterfly, right? You're kind of flitting around from company to company. You're doing usually kind of low responsibility, short-term contracts where you're helping a company either bootstrap themselves and get something up and running, some minimum viable product, or you're taking on overflow work. You're usually not working on anything mission critical. So it's low stress, but you incur the additional stress of the fact that you're kind of your own boss, which means you work because you got yourself a job. And if you're not out getting yourself a job all the time, you're out of work. And that's tough. And it's not necessarily for everyone. The tasks are usually very specific. So if you think about it, if you put yourself in the business owner's standpoint or the business owner's shoes, and you're going to hire somebody for a short-term period, you're going to know exactly what you need them to do. I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and you have this much time, and I'm going to give you this much money. So if you like working under those guys, this is a really good path to take. There's a lot of companies are getting much more flexible with where your butt is during the job. Is it in a seat in the office, or do I just need to Skype with you once a week and make sure you're on track? And that's gotten really common. So being a freelancer gives you the opportunity to go out and have a job where you're working remotely and telecommuting. And that's advantageous to a lot of people. The gigs tend to be short-term. These are not like things that you'll be at for years and years and years. And I would say like a 1-year contract as a freelancer is a pretty long-term job. The nice thing about that is you can take breaks between jobs. You may work for 6 months and work really hard and be, you know what, I need a month off. So take a month off. Right? Nobody's going to fault you for that. Even with unlimited PTO, if you try to take a month off consecutively, it's a little hard for the employer to swallow. So, and then the one issue with freelancing is you really get this kind of polarized work. You're either going to be doing something amazingly exciting, building something really cool, or you're going to be doing overflow work where it's like, my development team just doesn't have time to do this mundane data entry, but I need a developer to do it because it's got to be really meticulous. So here, take this stack of papers and type it in and make sure it's good. If that's what's paying the bills that month, that's what you need to do. So you can't really tell what the work's going to be. However, given all of this self-reliance that you have, the amount you work is up to you. The jobs you take is up to you. You may look at that job and go, you know what, I don't want to do that. And you can say no, which is a little hard to do when you're a full-time employee. So your income as a freelancer, it really starts getting predicated on a wide array of factors. As a full-time employee, you're going to go look on Glassdoor or something like that and find out what somebody with your level of ability and your skill set would make in this area. As a freelancer, that job may be $100,000 a year is about $50 an hour. There's about 2,000 hours in a work year. So if you take 2,000 and multiply it by your hourly rate, you figure out about how much you make, or divide your annual salary by 2,000, you get your hourly rate. So $50 an hour is about 100 grand a year. You may find out that the job that you're doing is approximately 100 grand a year job, but you have a great reputation. You came highly recommended and your last project was wildly successful, and you might get $75 an hour for the same exact work. So once you start becoming your own business owner and working for yourself like that, it's all predicated on your ability to market yourself, to keep your skills up, to kind of manicure your track record. So the next bit of this is kind of where I live. And for a while I was Dogbert in this great cartoon, which is far too accurate. But really, this is where you're going, right? The contractor consultant. Now, this has gotten to be two completely different gigs. So nowadays, a consultant is almost unheard of, especially in the technology industry. Back when the dot-com bubble exploded and then finally burst in the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, there was an unbelievable amount of money out in the world. So my job at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, I got hired for 2 months on a 2-month contract for $2,500 a day. And then they renewed me 13 times. So there was a lot of money out there. Those jobs don't generally exist anymore, but they're still out there. They're much harder to get. And right now it's going to be beyond most of your reach because of the fact that you need the background and you need the track record to reach that echelon. But you can certainly work toward that. The consulting side is really fun. This is where you're going into a company and you're helping them do a wide array of things. And it's not just writing code for them. It's figuring out their business process and rebuilding it and architecting it with software, teaching their development team or their in-house technology staff how to execute on that. So it's a different kind of animal than just writing code, although that's part of it. So let's look more at the contract side. You're kind of a coder entrepreneur now. You really are wholly a business owner. However, you've got some great staff at your disposal. You're going to start really leveraging relationships with recruiters. You're going to start leveraging relationships with friends and family and just building out your brand. These jobs tend to be very high responsibility. You are being brought in on mission critical stuff. So when I, as a technology leader or technology manager, I need to hire a contractor, I'm in a bind. I'm paying money to get that person in to work for me. So I'm paying the recruiter money to get you, and then I'm paying you. That means I'm in a situation that I got to get out of. So it tends to be high stress. You tend to get people that are not at their best. They tend to be a little bit spiky and, you know, they're under pressure themselves. Sometimes people deal with it gracefully, sometimes not. So you got to know that going in. And you're typically working on pretty mission critical stuff. If I don't get this done, my business is in trouble. So I need to bring in some help, whatever it costs. That's the viewpoint that you're walking into. There's great diversity in this. And this was a thing that really attracted me. I have worked for pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, public utilities, space and comm, a national lab, insurance. I've been all over the map. And every one of those jobs, while very different in what we were doing, like we teach here, is very much a similar gig, right? When you start writing CRUD functionality and building out web apps or client server apps, it all becomes the same stuff. Once you kind of look at it through the prism of get the data out of the database, put it in front of the user, let them change it, put it back in the database. That describes a game. It describes a nurse staffing system. It describes a, what's the guys, an actuary. It describes actuaries, right? All of that, it's all the same, different industries, but you get to tinker around with those. Totally fascinating working for Eli Lilly and watching chemists dream up, antipsychotic drugs, put the chemicals together all the way through to FDA approval and putting it on the shelf at some pharmacy. We help them model that business. So Prudential, and Eli Lilly's still around. So the project was at least that successful. What else? Here you'll start getting into contract lengths that are your average length is going to be on the 3 to 6 month line, but I've seen contracts that are like 2 years. You get a company that's building something up, like they're taking an old software system and porting it to something new. That's a long-term contract. And that can be really cool if you really like the technology, the people, the organization. Having that kind of stability as a contractor it's a nice breath of air, because oftentimes you're in for 3 months, 6 months. That means 2 months into the gig, you've got to start looking for work. So you're just constantly in this, I'll work a little bit and now I got to start looking. And then I find something, I'll work a little bit and now I got to start looking. So that's something to be aware of as well. And the other thing that was really fascinating for me is you really deal with a wide array of personas and archetypes. You get the pointy-haired boss from Dilbert, if anybody's familiar with that. You get people who are unbelievably nice and helpful and supportive, and you get people on the complete opposite side of the spectrum who, from day one, feel like they're trying to tear you down and get you out of there, and everything in between. So that's always an additional challenge, and if you look at it through the right glasses, it tends to be kind of fun. Navigating that, understanding it, negotiating it. So, and then lastly, this is the gold mines and gaping wounds. There's a lot of money to be made here. Typical contract gigs will range anywhere from $100 to $200 an hour. And like I said, they'll range anywhere from 3 months to a couple years. Again, these are things that you have to work up to. You're not going to walk out of here and have those jobs. But as you start building your brand and you start getting your skills better and you put a couple of success stories behind you, that stuff becomes attainable. Okay. A couple just bits of information about this. You'll typically be hired for a very set period of time. You can go in on a variety of guises, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you come in as a subcontractor, you have to carry your own liability insurance. I have a multi-million-dollar project. I hire you to come in and fix it. And somehow you blow away my source code repository on accident. It was a mistake, but I just lost millions of dollars. I will sue you, and you need to be protected. So you got to carry your own liability insurance. That's a huge, huge component to this. And a lot of places will not hire you without it. So they're just keep that stuff in mind, the logistics of it. Every gig you take puts your reputation on the line. Your performance on every gig, people hear about it. People talk, especially at the upper management level, they're all sharing information. You do great, it can make a career. And you do bad, and it can break something really, really wonderful. So it's a lot of stress on you. And ultimately, you are a business owner at that point. and you are the business. The company is paying for your bandwidth and your experience and your ability to get a job done. All right. So how do we get these jobs? Where do they come from? That's your first go. That is your go-to now. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your colleagues. Most of the jobs that end up being acquired from out of here come from somebody else that's gotten a job somewhere saying, hey, I had this great classmate, you guys should meet him. That kind of nepotism within the group is part of what you're paying for here. So leverage it. Be the kind of person that other people are going to want to recommend for a gig. Always, 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 always. Keep that at the forefront of your mind. All right. Go out and do stuff for your family or for friends. Some friend needs a website built, go build it. Go help them out. Even if you do it for free right now, it puts something on your resume and your portfolio. It builds your brand. Recruiters. Talk to recruiters. Get your resume out to them. Keep relationships with them. Get to know them and reach out to them periodically. Don't just send a resume off to somebody that you've had a phone conversation with and never talk to them again. My entire career was built on recruiters. I had a handful of them, 7 to 10 of them, that I would literally call up and say, hey, I've got a month left on my contract. Can you find me something? They all knew me. They knew what I did, how I did it, what my track record was. And within days, I would have a line of interviews. So I would get to the end of my contract, I'd go interview, and walk right into another job. And you can just keep working like that. But you have to nurture those relationships as well. Recruiters are really important. Finally, your reputation and kind of the word of mouth of what you do. And the easiest way to build that is just do work. Just get out there and work. Whether it's for free or you're bartering or whatever it is, get your work out there that people can see. Super important. And then this is kind of on the consulting side of things, but once you kind of climb up that ladder and you've gotten to a point where people kind of know who you are, know the projects you've worked on, there's still headhunters out in the world. People that will come from Amazon and they'll swoop into somebody at Microsoft and go, we need you. And I'm willing to buy you out of your position at Microsoft and give you X, Y, and Z to come work for Amazon. So this is the guy on the beach. This is the guy that's just got his stuff all set up. Money's just pouring on top of him. People are looking for him. And you can certainly get there. And even if you don't get to the point where headhunters are trying to grab you out of companies, you can get to that point where you've just got work flowing and it's easy and smooth and you just keep going from job that you like to job that you like to job that you want to do. So where do you get these gigs? This is what I call gig factories. So these are a lot. On the left side, you've got professional services companies. These are recruiters. If you're not familiar with these places, these are some of my favorites. They're some of the more reputable ones. They're companies that I've worked with in the past and that I would highly recommend. Monster and Dice are just giant job boards. Robert Half, Talenter, Mondo, Workbridge, Cybercoders, all of those are actual recruiting agencies. Go onto their websites, search through their jobs, find out who's managing that position, and get in touch with them. Even if that means not sending a resume, but calling and getting that person on the phone and talk to them. And then call them back in a month or 2 weeks and keep that relationship going. On the flip side of this now, there's in-house recruiters. A lot of bigger companies have their own in-house recruiting staff. So it's the same job, except that person works specifically for this company. What's the difference? The guys on the left are your allies. Those are the guys you go to and say, you know what? They're only offering 80 grand a year, but I really feel like I'm worth 100. What can we do? And the recruiter says, you know what? I have an idea. Let me go talk to the company. And they'll go talk to them and do that negotiation for you. Why is that good? Because if you come to me directly and go, you know what, you're only offering 80 and I really want 100, I may look at you and go, oh God, this guy's going to be in trouble. Right away, I can see it. When you have the recruiter in between, it kind of looks like the recruiter's doing it. The recruiter wants more money. It's not John. John's great. I love John. So you can leverage that relationship. With the people in-house, they're there to work for the company, and you don't get that opportunity. You don't get the benefit of that there. So now it's much more like you're dealing with the company themselves, the people that are going to hire you. However, both of them are recruiters, and it's in their best interest to bring you onto that job. Right? The in-house guys get paid a salary. If they hire you, they get paid the same salary. The other guys, they're a little hungrier because when they hire you, they get up to 30, 35% of your yearly salary. So if you go into a company at 100 grand a year, that recruiter stands to make 35K on putting you there. Not always that much, oftentimes a lot less, but I've heard of commissions that big. So that recruiter's there working hard to get you on the job, which is oftentimes good and it can be bad. If you get an unscrupulous recruiter, you may get somebody, and I've had this happen, you may get somebody who will sell things to the company that you haven't agreed to and sell things to you that the company hasn't agreed to. So you got to kind of know your recruiters and know who's good in there. All right, a handful of what I like to call tools of the trade. So things that you're going to want to have at your disposal, some skills. Being language agnostic, that's a huge thing. If you can walk into a company that is a C#.net house and you know your fundamentals so well that you can demonstrate them on the board with pseudocode or some other language, most places nowadays, it used to be a lot worse, but most places nowadays will look at you as a valuable resource. You don't know our particular tech, but that's the easy part. You know how to think, and that's what I need, okay? So as you get out of here, the fact that you're learning 5, 6, 7 different languages, all told, HTML, CSS, SQL, plus all the stack languages, you're really getting to this language agnostic point. So don't be afraid to take on challenges of new languages, whether you're learning them or going out and applying for jobs in those. You find some junior job writing Erlang code and you really get this stuff and you've done well on your projects and have a nice portfolio, don't go, God, I don't know Erlang at all. Call the recruiter and say, hey, everything you have on this list of requirements, I have except this one language. And I learn languages fast, as demonstrated by the fact that I picked up 3 full stacks at Coding Dojo in 3 months. Can you get me an interview? It's always worth it, okay? Thinking like an architect, building systems, not just writing code. How do I design this system? What am I going to make my database look like? What database am I going to choose? Am I going to use AWS or some other, cloud-based platform? Being able to build these systems up. So as you're doing your projects, you're gaining these skills. You're thinking more architecturally. Having some UI and UX experience, or at least awareness, understanding how the user experience affects the product, and being able to make recommendations toward that, or at least see what's good and bad when you deliver a minimum viable product. That's a huge deal as well. Test-driven development is gaining a lot of traction. It shows that you know how to write quality code and how to prove that it's got quality. That's always a benefit. And then RDD stands for requirements-driven design and development, which is really this notion of, if I'm going to hire you at $100 an hour, I want you to build what I told you to build. I don't want you coming back to me with a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't ask for and trying to bill me for it. Now it starts getting into this gray area of, are you trying to dupe me or trying to bilk more money out of me, or what's going on? When in actuality, it could just be that, I had the time and I thought I'd make this other stuff. It could be harmless, but really being requirements driven as a contractor is hugely important. The instruments of gaining these jobs are this is the crucial stuff. So you can either go W-2 or corp to corp. That's what C2C stands for. W-2 means you fill out all the government paperwork and your company is going to take taxes out. They're going to give you benefits. You become a formal employee. Corp to corp means you have become some sort of a corporate entity, whether it's an S corp or a C corp or an LLC. You are now responsible for your own taxation. So you may find a job that pays much less than you can live on if it were W-2. Right? You got to figure a $60,000 a year job is going to put $40,000 a year in your pocket. Divide that by 2,000 work hours. So you're making about $20 an hour net. You may not be able to live on that. But if you're going corp to corp, you're making that full $60,000. You have to pay taxes. I'm not going to counsel you on that. You need to deal with that. But the fact is your monthly income goes up significantly, and it may make that job viable for you. So you go spend the $800 to $1,500 to incorporate yourself, and now suddenly you can take lower paying jobs that actually put more money in your pocket. Okay. Negotiating components. This works for anything, whether you're an employee or not, right? They may come back to you and say, I can't pay you $75 an hour. I can only give you 50. And you may say, okay, well, if that's the case, how about I work from home 3 days a week? Or I get an extra week of paid vacation, or you get me a new laptop to work with, or it can be anything. All of this stuff is really negotiable. And if you're personable about it and you're friendly and it's non-confrontational, it can be really powerful, and you can end up with a really great deal for you, whatever that might be. Being able to wear many hats is a huge thing. So when you're talking to the manager of the team and you're talking kind of mirroring his expectations, being able to sit in his shoes, what's important for that person about this candidate, and being able to talk to that person. Talking to a developer who's interviewing you on a purely technical level, and talking with them on that level. So all of these things are just kind of the tools that you're going to use to gain these jobs. And then finally, and I say this a lot, honesty is your biggest ally. Be really confident in what you know, and be equally confident in what you don't know. Do not be afraid in an interview to say, I don't know. A quick anecdote. My gig at the lab, I got a call from the headhunter, and he said, I got this job at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Really cool. He described it to me. I'm like, yes, that sounds great. We wanted to get out of LA. It was in Northern California. So he sets up the interview. I get the two guys that would be my bosses on the phone with me. No technical interview or anything. They just got on the phone with me, and they start asking me, do you know this? No. Do you know this? I've never even heard of that. Do you know this? Mm-mm. How about this technology? I've heard of it, but I've never used it. How about this? Yeah, I've written a few lines of that. I've played with it a little bit, nothing big. How about this? No, never heard of it. No, yes, no, never heard of it, and no. And finally, I was like, you know what, you guys, I feel like I'm wasting your time. I'm really sorry. I don't know any of the tech you guys are using. And they both laughed, and they said, you know what? Nobody knows the tech we're using. It's all a bunch of experiments that we thought we'd try. And we just thought we'd see if you might have some experience in it. Okay. Got off the phone. 5 minutes later, the recruiter called me back, said they want you to start on Monday. I would never have gotten that job if I tried to bluff my way through it. No way. So be comfortable and confident in what you don't know. Oftentimes, as a hiring manager, I will look at a candidate and go, I can teach them that. The thing that I know they don't know, I can teach that to them. That's not a big deal. The fact that you think well, I can sit with you on a daily basis without wanting to kill you, that's all much more important than you knowing this weirdo technology that I happen to be using. So, all right. So now, if you are a contractor or a freelancer, you're getting the job. How do you bid this job, right? How do you ask for the money, and what do you need to do to make that work? So there's a couple ways that you can do this. And to start off with, barter if you can, even if you're bartering for nothing. Let me just make that thing for you so I get something on my resume. Or maybe it's, hey, buy me lunch every day that I'm working on your project, and I'll write your website for you. You don't have to worry about food or whatever it is. Right? It's a really good way where no money's exchanging hands, but you still get to do a job, build your reputation, build your resume, build your portfolio, and make something in return for it. Totally viable thing. This is kind of the grassroots of being a freelancer. This is where you're going to start. Okay. Next, we have these kind of two sides of a coin. You can either bid a gig as a fixed fee or on a time and materials basis. So let me describe this. Somebody comes to me and they say, okay, I want you to build this website, and it's going to have 5 pages, and I want this back end and blah, blah, blah. And they describe what it's going to do. And I look at that, and I can either tell them that's going to take me about 40 hours to build, and I'm normally $100 an hour. That's the time and materials thing. Okay, so in their mind, they're like, okay, what, $4,000? We could do that. But what that means is if I take 60 hours, they're now paying $6,000. right? And if that project goes on and on and on, they're basically agreeing to pay you for your time. Very, very dangerous for the client. And most clients won't take that deal. They want to know, how much am I paying you? That's the fixed fee. Now, the fixed fee is just the opposite. That says, in your mind, you go, I'm going to take 40 hours to do this, and I want to make $100 an hour. So I'm going to tell them $4,000 it's going to cost you. And they go, great. And then you realize that you didn't do your analysis properly. And you didn't realize that there were 3 other screens that had to be built and a whole other back end. And now you're working on your 80th hour for $4,000, and you're making $20 an hour, not 100. And you're eating it. So it's dangerous for you, but you're much more likely to get the job. So what do we do with that? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do almost always is get your estimate and double it. Just flat out double it. Think about your projects that you've worked on or your assignments that you looked at and you went, I can write this login and reg page against the mean stack in a couple hours. And 4 hours later, you're like, I'm still working on this thing. It's about twice as long, right? So don't be afraid to do that. Now, the caveat to that is if I'm going to go bid a job that I think is going to take me 6 months and I tell the client it's going to take a year, that's a tough nut to swallow. So now I've got to kind of walk that a little bit more delicately. And I might not want to just blindly double it. I might want to look at the pieces that I'm really unsure about and double just those, okay? You can also either front load or back load things. So a good example, we had a student here who went through the iOS track, and we had a project come through. It was a small company. They said, we've got this prototype that we built in Keynote in Apple's presentation software, which is a brilliant prototyping tool if you guys are interested in prototyping stuff. They had this fully functional, clickable prototype built in Keynote, and they wanted this guy to just build out a minimum viable product in iOS. So he started looking at it, and this is how this whole talk started, was because I was helping him navigate this entire process. As we were figuring out how to bid it, and he had given the bid to the client, he was just waiting for them to come back to him with an approval to start working. So I said, hey, why don't you go, I mean, you're not doing anything, go and take that prototype and just start building it. Start building the skeleton of it. There's a bunch of stuff you can do there without any assets, without anything. And if they come back and say, you know what, it's too much, then what have you lost? You've just gotten more experience doing this. Long story short, he ended up getting the job. And by the time they signed the paperwork, he had 2/3 of the application already written. So now he signed on to make, he still made the same amount of money he would, but in actuality, he spent a very small amount of time to make the money that he made because he'd already done a whole bunch of that work. So that's a way you can approach that stuff. On the other side of that, the backloading might be, listen, I will work on this part of your system dirt cheap. And if you like what I do, you agree to raise my rate to this for the remainder of the project. So again, there's all sorts of ways you can negotiate, but that's one of the tools of the trade, as it were. And then my last one, I have to give you my one little bit of devious, subversive salesmanship. So I used to work at Guitar Center way, way, way back in the day when it was a commission-only sales position. And you either got to be a really good salesman or you got fired and you made no money. And I learned this very valuable lesson, which is the first person that talks loses the game. So we would get people that would come in, and I have a guitar, and the retail price for it is $1,000. But everybody knows Guitar Center never sells stuff for retail price. It's a discount shop. Here's our technique. How much is this guitar? I really love it. It's $1,000. Now, that person's either going to say, $1,000, are you nuts? I can get it down the street for $800. Oh, well, what can you afford? If $800 is what you think that place will sell it to you for, what can you afford? The minute that person gives me a price, I know I can go up from there. Had I said, now I may say it's $1,000, and I actually had this happen, and the guy goes, oh, great, $1,000, here you go. Huge commission. Other younger salesmen would come in, they'd go, it's $1,000, but I can give it to you for $500. Little did they know, it was the guy that was going to go, $1,000, great. and they just lost $500. So when you quote your price, do not be afraid to stand on it and let them respond. And try not to get in your own way. This job's going to cost $5,000. But I'm new. It's my first job. I'd be willing to do it for $3,000. They might be going, geez, $5,000. That's amazing, right? Or you say, I'll do it for $3,000, and they were willing to go to $4,000. So now you've just lost $1,000. So this is part of being confident. Be confident in what you guys know, right? You're going to walk out of here with a great education. And I've seen the people that graduate from this program, and it's impressive. Even the people that struggle through this thing walk out of here with a great education in this. Enough easily to be able to say, I'm worth this amount of money. And that's what I would like to be paid to do this job. And then shut up. All right. Last little bit here and we'll wrap up. So what are the common mistakes that you can make? How can you get yourself into trouble with this? There's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of dangers in this, especially if you go down the I'm an entrepreneur route. Full-time employee, unless you do something egregious like leave dirty dishes in the sink or leave a candy bar on the floor, ping pong balls laying around, you're fine. Otherwise, if you're your own boss, you're running your own business. I got one of my favorite graphics up there, and this is something to live and die by. Those 3 circles in that Venn diagram are fast, cheap, and good. And your client gets to pick any 2 of them. Only ever. Because the one in the middle doesn't exist. There is no fast, cheap, and good. Right? If you want it fast and cheap, it's going to be ugly. And if you want it fast and good, it's going to cost. Right? And if you want it good and cheap, it's probably going to be slow. So you get to pick 2 of them, and that's fine, as long as you set that expectation with your client. And most people know this little meme here, but it's important to keep in mind. And don't feel like you're under delivering or not doing your job or incapable or not good if you're trying to get to that center point and you're not making it, because nobody else is either. Right? Try for it. Always, always, always try for it. Just don't feel bad when you don't hit it. That's okay. Here's your first problem: lack of analysis. Now, we talk a lot about analysis in here. Let's break down this site. Let's break down this project. Let's break down this screen, okay? One of my favorite interview questions is, how do you know when you're done analyzing a problem? I want everybody to think about that. How do you know when you're done analyzing a problem? There is no real right answer. But to me, I know when I'm done analyzing a problem, when I don't have any more questions about it, right? I equate this, there's an analysis phase on a project. When I go in as a consultant to a company, my first step is analyzing the problem. I equate that to walking into an unknown dark room. The first thing I'm going to do is start asking questions, which is flipping on the lights. And some lights are going to go on. But if you look around the room here, there's a lot of shadows around here where there might be scary monsters hanging out. And those scary monsters are the things that come up after you've written 50,000 lines of code and you're at the final hour and you're getting ready to cross the finish line and you go, oh my God, I have no way of putting that bit in, because you just found out about it. You just discovered it. So make sure you do your analysis. Make sure you understand the problem. The flip side of that coin we call analysis paralysis. And a lot of developers will get caught in this thing where they're constantly revving on the analysis, trying to figure it out, and they never execute, right? You got to start writing code at some point. So get all of your questions answered. Make sure you understand that I've got what I know now. I'm going to iterate on this. I'll go make some stuff. I'll find more questions and I'm going to go ask those. And then I'll make some more stuff and I'll ask more questions, right? But get through that first draft of understanding the shape of the problem, understanding any pitfalls, edge cases, all of that stuff. The things we do in algorithms and the things we do before projects, right? Next, scope creep. This is a good one. So same project, the iOS project. They came to this guy and they said, we want to build this thing and we're going to use, what was it? Firebase. We're going to use Firebase as our backend, which is a pre-built out kind of plug and play database system management, middleware, everything. And we're like, oh, this will be great. We'll turn it on. We'll do a little bit of configuring, wire everything up, and it'll be good to go. He bid the job. And then they said, you know what? We don't want to use Firebase. We just want to put it up on AWS, which meant now he had to install and configure, populate, write middleware, write a maintenance screen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they expected him to do it under the initial bid. That's scope creep. That, yes, I will do that for you. I'm more than happy to do that for you. It's a different work order. It's a different set of work. So we're going to need to negotiate the price for that. Let's go back to this other thing. Okay, so don't let those things happen. You'll bury yourself and you'll wind up working for a year or more for pennies, literally, on a project that's getting ugly. The next thing is, and this is a hard one, because we're all going to want to think that we can do more than we can do, always. Right? This is why the estimate doubling thing happens. Get overly ambitious. And you'll look at something, you'll be like, oh, I've done that before. It only took me a few minutes. That's a few minutes worth of work. I'm not even going to put that as a line item when I bid. And then that thing takes 6 hours. You're like, oh, and you got to explain where that 6 hours went to the client. Well, it wasn't on. That thing that you did is not even on here. How did it take 6 hours? That's a little scary, okay? Especially if it takes 6 days, 2 weeks. Another quick little anecdote. My worst, absolute worst, this is my gaping wound story. I got hired to build a social networking portal, basically Facebook for air travel. And it was a C#.net project. And in the middle of the project, I was probably 3/4 of the way through it. I hit a wall. I had a bug that was so bizarre and difficult to reproduce and so devastating, I could not figure out what it was. And it took me 5 days to track it down. And I had no way of explaining what it was. It turns out there was a bug in the Microsoft.net framework that I had found and brought up to Microsoft, which was the only saving grace, because if it wasn't something wholly out of my control, I would have been in a boatload of trouble. So this is that place where it's like, all right, you got to be very careful with what you're doing and how you're going about affecting your work orders, how you're analyzing the problems, what you're getting into. Set expectations with your client. This is exactly it. Make sure you communicate all the time with whoever's paying you. So this is the last little bit here. Same project, the iOS project. It was a stereo viewer, like Google Cardboard, that thing where you put your iPhone in, you look around and the whole thing moves with you. It's super cool. We had no idea how to do the 3D video. It was a big black hole. So I told him, when you bid this job, just let them know this is a big unknown. What we've found looks like it could be really easy. So I'm going to say about this amount of time, but I really don't know. And then we got into the bowels of it. And because it's so new, there was very little information out there. It's almost nothing to kind of push against and get help on. And it wound up dragging on a week and a half, 2 weeks. The saving grace and the thing that made it okay was that he was in constant contact with them. I made a little bit of traction, but I'm still not there. 2 days later, hey, the traction that I made fell apart. It's not going to be good. We're going to try this other thing. A couple days later, that thing seems to be going good. And now we're making some headway, and I'll show you what I've got tomorrow. And then finally we delivered something. They're like, yeah, this is great. But they knew at every step there was trouble. We know what to expect. We're going to have to push the timeline out. He ate the money, right? His hourly rate went down. The dollars didn't change. The time did. But that's okay. Sometimes that happens. It's just part of the game. So finally, let me go back here real quick. Don't sell yourself short. Don't go bid a project for pennies because you're new, okay? If you've got a job that you know you can do and you should be making $30 an hour for it, go make $30 an hour for it. Don't sit there and go, well, I've only got 3 months of experience. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'll bid $10 an hour and hope I get the job. Don't do that. You guys are going to walk out of here with too many skills that a lot of people don't have. And from the work that I see you do and the stuff that you're going to put on your portfolios, you're all going to be worth that money. Now, you don't want to go overbid yourself and go find a $100 an hour job and go, damn it, I want $100 an hour and I can do this job. If you can, great. But don't be overly ambitious, because that's one of the problems. So don't sell yourself short. All right. So thank you guys. One of my favorite people in the world for quotes is this old school salesman named Zig Ziglar, and this is a great quote. You can have everything you want in your life if you just help enough people get what they want. So go find those people that need something, start building your career, build your portfolio, build your reputation, and then go sit on the beach and drink a beer while you do your work. Thanks, guys.